Good morning, friends. This past week, I've had the honor of driving my stepdaughter, Nora, to and from zoo camp. I don't often get this extra time with her because of the timing of her activities after school and the distance between our home and the hospital where I work. But the zoo is near the hospital, so voila! We gained an extra hour and some together every day this week. And it's just such a gift to have that time with her. It's fun, and it's also just a great time to hear what's happening in her maturing mind. One of her favorite songs right now is the song Brave by Sara Bareilles. And it has become the anthem of our commutes. It's her pick, and I love it. It's just what I want my kid using all her lung power to sing with all her heart. It starts like this. You can be amazing. You can turn a phrase into a weapon or a drug. You can be the outcast or be the backlash of somebody's lack of love. Or you can start speaking up. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be the backlash of somebody's lack of love. Everyone has felt it. And more than likely, we've all created pain for someone else because of our own lack of love. Our words can cut, or they can heal, like a balm in Gilead. For Nora, this plays out as exclusion and mean words flung by kids in classrooms, camps, and playgrounds. In my life and work, it plays out as people encountering one another in varying states of stress and trauma, and not always having the capacity to really see each other and care for one another in kindness. My guess is that everyone here, everyone listening, has had some kind of painful encounter recently. They're extremely common. Human interaction is hard. Sometimes we choke on the vine of others' cruelty, rejection, or unexamined words. And sometimes we become part of the choking vine, even if that's not what we intend. So connecting this with the gospel today, I wonder what would have been different if Herod had listened to advice like that from Sara Bareilles. Mark tells us that Herod was awed by John the Baptist. He knew John was good, upright, and holy. And he even liked listening to John, even though what he heard often left him greatly disturbed. No doubt John's words were brave, and they were truth to power. So even though Herod's heart was touched by John, and something about him maybe wanted to have and be more affected by this one they called the Baptist, there were people in his midst whose power of influence was all-consuming. So let's say the man in charge really wasn't in charge of himself. He abdicated his own heart and wisdom out of fear of damaging his political image, to the point that he murdered John, and with John, a piece of his own soul, the piece that perhaps longed to be converted toward love, toward a way of leadership not rooted in fear, but in compassion and holy love. No wonder his first thought upon hearing about Jesus was that it was really John who had risen from the dead. Do you think Herod felt haunted? Let's hold that thought, because Nora's favorite song continues. Nothing's gonna hurt you the way that words do when they settle neath your skin, kept on the inside, no sunlight, sometimes a shadow wins. But I wonder what would happen if you say what you want to say and you let the words fall out honestly. I want to see you be brave. It's a really great song. Nora rocks it. And I can see ways that these words that she continues to listen to over and over again are seeping in. She told me a story this week about how one girl was being mean to her at camp and trying to control her and to control other kids so they wouldn't play with her. At her meanest, Nora said this girl put a lot of effort into trying to steal away her favorite friend. Luckily for Nora, the girl that she enjoyed playing with so much was true to herself. Nora said that together they were like armor and shields, protecting each other. She preached to me about it too. Nora said, friends don't control each other. That's not nice, and it's not right. I don't control my friends, but I do control my friendships. I asked her to say more about that, and she told me that she chooses her friends carefully. She also told me that if the girl who was being mean to her just learned how to be kind, she would be friends with her too. Because if people change and learn how to be good to each other, it's better for everyone to be friends. She's learning boundaries too. Not everyone deserves our energy. Not everyone's words deserve a clear path to our hearts and our minds. She's creating her own shield and learning to deflect other people's meanness while practicing being a kind person. She said it's a lot easier to do when you have at least one good friend and you're like a team. You help each other. I feel like more of us need to go back to a childhood where we can practice that with more support. Playground problems become adult problems, and we all know that is a lifelong challenge. The song goes on. Everybody's been there. Everybody's been stared down by the enemy, fallen for the fear, and done some disappearing, bowed down to the mighty. But don't run. Stop holding your tongue. Maybe there's a way out of the cage where you live. Maybe one of these days you can let the light in. Show me how big your brave is. That last line is so big, it's so emphatic, and we sing it with our voices loud and our fists pumping and our fingers pointing in the air. Show me how big your brave is. If only Herod had been brave. He was trapped in his own cycles of behavior and social expectation. Saying no to Salome would have been risky. Honestly, he probably needed some boundaries way before that. He was already entrapped in a pattern of unreflective thinking. Offering up anything to someone because you're enwrapped with their beauty isn't wise. But it's never too late for us to begin choosing differently, especially when we are compelled by the love and wisdom of God, seeking space in our hearts and minds. That's really what redemption's about. What if Herod had responded, I said I would give you anything, meaning anything that's mine to give. I didn't say I would take someone's life for you. How many other ways out can you think that Herod might have taken if he truly wanted to take a step closer to protecting John and becoming more like the prophet? Is it true there was nothing he could do but serve up John's head on a platter? I wish it wasn't so, but everyone who shows up here is showing how big your brave is. We come from a church that has decided that its rules and ancient patriarchal social conventions are more important than love that values diversity, equity, and inclusion of all its people. When we risk when we show up together, and those risks are greater for some than for others. For example, people who work for the institutional church risk losing jobs if they openly support women's ordination, LGBTQ affirmation, birth control, and bodily autonomy for those of us bearing wombs. We're here today because we actively choose something different. We're risking the upset of a status quo for the gain of a true community, shared leadership, and gender equality. And while the risk might produce backlash and misunderstanding among friends, families, and the institutional church, we risk for the greater good. We risk because there is something speaking to us in the silence of our souls, in the beckoning of our hearts, in our growing relationships with one another that says, this is where we belong. We risk as prophets risk. We risk because this is the way love is speaking, and we are beckoned to love one another and show how big our brave is for the sake of discipleship, for the sake of being in communion with the living Christ, for the sake of unity with God and the glorious diversity of God's creation. Our community is young. We'll never know what would have happened if Herod hadn't gone with the flow of social convention and not murdered John. But we will get to see what happens when we follow the light of Christ's love in a way that honors the dignity, humanity, spirituality, and worth of every human being in our midst. We won't do it perfectly, but we can do it authentically as a community of believers and as individuals faithfully navigating our own complicated lives. Here, God is gathering the dispersed flocks. Here, we will recover and flourish, and none shall be missing. Our God, who is love, is our justice. Nora's favorite song concludes, innocence, your history of silence won't do you any good. Did you think it would? Let your words be anything but empty. Why don't you tell them the truth? Say what you want to say, and let the words fall out honestly. I want to see you be brave. What if that's Jesus' song to us this week? What if it's John the Baptist calling us to our own conversions? What if it's God speaking, I want to see you be brave? And what if we're here together to remind each other we're not in this alone? Sometimes we have to be brave in our own lives and in our own ways, but we come together as a people who walk this life together. Like Nora so wisely said, it's so much easier to walk in truth when we have a friend. Through the big and the little. And here, all are welcome at this table.